Hello. This webinar is going to talk about professional standards. USDA has set up standards for minimum professional standards requirements for school nutrition professionals who manage and operate national school lunch and school breakfast programs. This also applies to individuals hired to work in the kitchen, whether they're frontline workers and the kitchen back workers. They all have hiring standards, and they all have minimum professional hours they have to meet in specified topics to qualify for the program. This standard became effective July 1, 2015. Professional standards create minimum hiring standards for new school food authority directors based on a school district size. It also requires minimum annual training for all new and current school nutrition professionals in the current year. So here's a short list, quick overview of the hiring standards. We're going to start at the bottom and work up. Any school district that has 10,000 or more students has a specific and the most restrictive hiring standard. Currently, Maine does not have any districts that fall within that. The next size is 2,500 to 9,999. Currently, Maine has approximately 13 districts in that size. And then there's 2,499 or less. And they all have certain hiring standards that need to be met, must be met for someone to become a director. A current director who moves to a different district within the same size bracket will not be required to meet the hiring criteria. However, if moving to a higher bracket, the new requirements must be met. So if you're working in a district and you've been in that district prior to the July 2015 hiring standards, you were grandfathered in because you were already there, and if you didn't have these requirements, you were okay. However, if you're going from a medium-sized, smaller district and being hired in a larger district, the one that Maine only has 13 to 14 districts, you would have to meet that higher qualification to get that job. Food service director hiring standards, we're going to go over this briefly. Bachelor's degree or specific major, or. Now all of these have an or, it's not this, this, and this, and this. So if you have a bachelor's degree in a specific major, I'm not going to get into the list of those majors now, they can be found on our website. Or a bachelor's degree with an academic major and a state recognized certificate. Maine currently does not have a school food service director manager recognized certificate program. Or a bachelor's degree with an academic major and at least 2 years of experience, or an associate's degree with a specific major and at least 1 year experience. For small SFAs, those that have most of what Maine has, bachelor's degree with a specific major, or bachelor's degree with any academic major, there's actually a specific list, or an associate's degree with a specific major and at least 1 year of experience, or a high school diploma or GED and 3 years of experience. And when we say years of experience, we're talking about years of experience in school food service, because food service in any other program, which a lot of people already know, is different in school food service and, say, a nursing home. Then we have these as well, smaller districts of less than 500 students. The law provides state discretion on education requirements. Districts need to contact the state agency for approval to hire a person that's going to be in charge of a district with fewer than 500 students. How many hours of annual training are required? A school food service area director must have a minimum of of 12 hours annual continuing education or training. You watch a webinar, you watch this webinar, you'll get so many hours, so many partial hours to be contributed to that. School food service area directors in all LEAs, at least 5 hours of food safety training within 5 years prior to the start date, or completed within 30 days of their start date. So if you've had training, say you took a ServSafe class within 5 years before you started, and it was an 8-hour class, not including the test, that would meet the requirement. Plus, you must have 8 hours of food safety training, 8 hours every 5 years. School food service area managers, a minimum of 10 hours annual continuing education training each and every year. Staff, other than a director or a manager who works at least 10 hours, 20 hours each week, must have a minimum 6 hours annual continuing education and training. Part-time staff, if an individual works less than 20 hours a week, that person must have at least 4 hours of annual continuing education training, regardless of the number of part-time hours. So if they work 2 hours a day, 8 hours, 10 hours a week, they still need 4 hours of annual training. Anyone listed here, if they're hired after January 1st, that employee is only required to meet half of the mentioned hours. You hire someone in February that they're going to be a part-time staff, they would only need to get 2 hours of training this year, but next year they would have to go up to the 4-hour minimum. School year 2021 only, hours in excess of required training hours earned in school year 2020 may be applied to school year 2021 training hours. This is only for school year 2021. Increased training with the unanticipated school closure. There's a lot of training that had to be done for the unanticipated school closure, so we're going to allow those excessive hours to roll into next year. This is school year 20, school year 21 only. At the end of school year 21, if you have excessive hours, those hours go away, and at the beginning of school year 22, you start at 0. Volunteer staff, not a regular position. The district will have a volunteer substitute training program because they still need to be trained on the job they're going to do. They may not have a minimum training hours for each year, but they need to be trained on the job they're going to do. Are you a director or are you a manager? Person doing the duties, it's not the title. They're not going to, because in some districts, the manager may not do the application, but there's no director, the manager's the one in charge. But maybe it's someone else that's doing the applications, but they're the manager. The director may delegate to someone else, to a manager, to do the applications. A general statement about the positions of director and manager. A director develops, creates, and plans. A manager implements the plan. Which one are you? We have detailed samples on our webpage. Possible that a district has 2 directors or even 2 managers. And then, as I mentioned previously, there are specific key areas that the training has to be in. Those key areas, and these are much further broken down. You've got nutrition, operations, administration, and communications and marketing. Nutrition is broken down further into menu planning, nutrition education, and general nutrition, And these can be broken down even further, but that's the major subtopic that nutrition covers. Next, you've got operations, and this is a very big subject area. Food production, serving food, cashier and point of service, purchasing and procurement, receiving and storage, food safety, and HACCP. And there are many types of things that you can watch under these to meet these specific criteria. Administration, training on the free and reduced price meal benefits applications. Program management, teaching your managers, if you're a director, how to manage the program, how to manage the people. Financial management, do you know the finances that it costs to run your program? Human resources and staff training, facilities and equipment planning. Communications and marketing, pretty basic communications and marketing. Helpful hits, workshops and meetings count. You're watching these webinars that we have, they count. You attend a child nutrition meeting, they count. So even other webinars. Institute of Child Nutrition and the National SNA School Nutrition Organization has many trainings available for your staff to watch, for you to staff. Now, here's a bonus. You training your staff counts for both of you. You go to a training, you go back to your staff, you train your staff on what you learned, you'll get credit for attending that training, and you'll get credit for teaching your staff what you learned at that training. You would have to have documentation of that training you give your staff that includes an agenda, dates, and participants. You would have to have either a certificate of the training you attended or document the fact that you were there. What does not count? Training not related to food service production. Self-directed training without prior approval from the director or manager. So if your staff goes on and they see something that they think is interesting and they watch it and they come back to you and say, I watched this training on food safety, you have to approve the trainings before they watch it. They can't just go out and find stuff. You have to approve it. They have to come to you to get your permission to attend that training. Food and vendor shows do not count. The training that school districts provide at the beginning of the school year does not count. The training that school districts do at the beginning of the year covers certain things such as civil rights. That does not equate to the child nutrition civil rights training. Our training is much more in depth. So our civil rights training is the only one that counts for that. On our webpage, we have a page dedicated to professional standards. Information is available for there that can help you and guide you to meet what your staff has to do and what you have to do. As I mentioned earlier, there's a company, Institute of Child Nutrition, in Mississippi. They offer free trainings online. If there are enough people that are offering in-person training, those people that attend the Maine School Nutrition Association meetings have seen, and I'm sure been in sessions with ICN. They have a lot of different webinars on their webpage, and each of those webinars is broken up into the subtopic that it covers. You can find ICN at the webpage shown. If you search for it, use the ICN. If you search for ICN, you're going to come up with some interesting things, and they're not what you want. Tracking your training, you have to keep track of the training that your staff has attended. How do I keep track of training and what documentation is required? What do you have to have? Copies of the following documentation is acceptable. A training agenda. So I mentioned earlier, if you're going to be training your staff, you have to have an agenda. You don't have to write down what you said and read from that what you said. You need an outline. You need an agenda. You have to have a sign-in sheet and date of when and where and what topic your training did. If you're doing something in person, some form of certificate of completion might be available. If you're watching a webinar, print off the first screen, record how long it takes. If you're doing it for your staff, have them sign in. That's your documentation. We need to know the date, what the topic is, and who attended. Each SFA must decide how to maintain the records that document training completion. The school nutrition program director is ultimately responsible for demonstrating during an administrative review that the SFA is in compliance with the professional standards. So if you're a director of a program that has 10 people, we come in to do a review, we're not going to ask those 10 people what they did for the training. We're going to ask you what your 10 people completed for training. USDA has a professional standards training tracker. It can be found at their school meals webpage. It's a web-based tool. It requires a level 1 USDA e-authentication account. If you have a level 1 USDA e-authentication account and you're using it for the food buying guide, you're all set up. You can use this tool. That tracker, they have a webinar that you can watch. You can email, telephone them for help on how to use their training tracker. Maine Child Nutrition, developed by a previous employee, has an Excel training tracker. It's very simple to use. It's in Excel. You would download it, put in everyone's name, formulas in it that brings everyone to one tab. You can see how many hours they've had. You have to enter what level they're at, and that will determine how many hours they have, and that can keep track of the training they've done. Very simple tool to use. You don't need a code. You don't need authorization. Download it, use it, make your life easier. Online help. We have a lot of online help for professional standards on our webpage. If you were to do a search on the web of USDA Professional Standards, you can get to a page that would help you do that. Shows more stuff. There's a lot of good information there as well. And there's a link to that page from our webpage, online help. Need to know what was done, who did it, where. Don't need to know where they did it. We need to know when. Was it a webinar? Was it in person? If you have any questions about any of this, please call us, please email us with your questions. We would prefer you to ask us than someone else. I hope this information was useful, and I hope you're able to do what you need to do, gather the data, keep it handy, and track your staff. Thank you. Have a good day.